Good evening, everyone. It is Yang Yan Zhao. I am back with a special Thursday night edition. Tonight, we have a very special guest, a man who transcends all edition of tabletop role playing, a true Renaissance man who can bridge the past to the present to the future. I have the Scrying Dutchman, Victor Gorchev.
Hey everyone, and thanks. I mean, that makes me sound way more awesome than I am actually.
Well, I mean, your Kickstarter looks pretty awesome. But just for a little background for anyone who doesn't know, what exactly is it that you do?
I'm Victor. I'm from the Netherlands, and I write tabletop games. And I'm kind of known mostly right now, at least, for kind of like my supplements for 5th edition, for Old School Essentials, which I'm kickstarting, and for a bunch of other games involving kind of like modern and urban fantasy rules. I'm big on firearms. I love shoehorning firearms into stuff, so that's kind of what I'm known for. I'm known for basically dressing up orcs in tracksuits and giving them AK-47s.
So one of the things that really interested me in your current campaign is what is it about modern urban fantasy that really sort of scratches that itch for you?
That's actually kind of a hard question because I don't know how why do you like what you like? You know, that's always a hard question for me. But I don't know. I just kind of like that mashup of like fantasy stuff, like magic, mystery, vampires, like myth, monsters, all that stuff. And I just like that mashup with like the contemporary because especially if you have a setting where humanity isn't actually like aware of that stuff, if it's like a secret like underbelly of the world, like I love that stuff. Like in most fantasy settings, if you're like a farmer in Dungeons and Dragons, dragons exist, the gods exist, that stuff is like fairly everyday for you. I mean, you still won't like a dragon landing on your farm and eating you, but you know that they exist. But like in a modern setting, like you could just be dudes like us, and meanwhile, next door there's like a vampire eating somebody. And I know I just think that stuff is interesting, and I like thinking about that stuff, and I like running games using those sorts of settings. So
and another thing I noticed about it is most of the chatter for tabletop role playing games these days. Of course, you have Dungeons of Dragons and like medieval fantasy. That's like the 400-pound gorilla. And then it seems like after that, very quickly you get into a few different kinds of sci-fi. But you don't really hear a lot about modern or maybe alternative reality games. But there used to be a bunch in the 70s. What do you think sort of happened to them? Why did they sort of fade out?
I'm actually not sure about that myself, because I do wonder about that myself a lot, because not even just in the 70s, like in the early 2000s, you had like D20 Modern, which was hugely popular and still is to this day. Whenever I bring up D20 Modern on Twitter, people are like, oh yeah, I love D20 Modern. That one game, 5th edition game, Everyday Heroes, which is kind of like the 5th edition take on D20 Modern. It had like a really successful Kickstarter, so obviously people like that stuff, but then like you said, nobody really talks about it. And I do wonder about that myself, because that's what I do, that's what I'm trying to promote, that's what I'm trying to make some money on, so I can make and finish my books. So yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, why is there this like kind of like behind the scenes interest, but then nobody, like I said, nobody really talks about it, and I don't really have the answers myself. Like a question for the ages, I guess.
Well, there, of course, everything is sort of fashionable. We've seen Dungeons and Dragons go from popular to not popular to, I guess, still it's on that peak, maybe slightly trending down. Superhero games used to be incredibly popular. Do you think we're sort of like primed for a comeback for urban fantasy, modern urban fantasy?
It could be, but I think pop culture also plays a big part, and
Mhm.
for D&D especially, like that had like a big resurgence just around like I don't know, like what 2015 because of Critical Role and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So that kind of like shapes, I think, the perception on the hobby. Uh, Superheroes like that. Some of the superhero games are fairly popular, I guess, because of the MCU, all the movies that have been coming out. So I guess we just need something in pop culture that like scratches that modern fantasy itch. I mean, there was that Bright movie with Will Smith, which I personally thought was awesome. Everyone hates it. I thought
Yeah,
it was
right?
awesome,
No, that
but
was fantastic. Why
yeah,
I don't understand that either.
yeah. And I wish they had done more with that. I think it would have probably worked better as a TV show than a movie because it
Yeah, a
would have given them
series, yeah.
more. Would have given them more time to like world build and stuff like that. Yeah, like I guess there hasn't been really any shows or movies or even like video games or whatever that really lean into that. So I think that also reflects a little bit on the tabletop scene. Maybe I'm completely
Hmm.
off base, but that's just what I think off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that, like you said, sort of pop culture does influence
Yeah,
a little bit of the flavor. I think especially more than it did back in the 70s when
yeah,
TSR was around.
hmm,
Although you could say people who played back then were really influenced more by books
yeah,
and
yeah.
like
That pop
different
culture was,
pulps and everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
that pop culture was Conan, Tolkien, all that stuff. Our modern pop culture, I think, is like movies and video games.
Yeah, well, and even more YouTube, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I think you're definitely right with the Critical Role, which uh, is pretty divisive, apparently,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, which always amuses me. But yeah, but so um, being an American,
Hmm.
mostly knowing North American stuff. I'm kind of curious how things are in Europe. I've had Ed Jowett from Shades of Vengeance on a few times.
Hmm.
He's a British guy, and I mean, is England really part of Europe? So I was just kind of wondering, like,
Yeah.
what's sort of the modern tabletop scene like in, let's say, mainland Europe.
Yeah.
What is it still like epic fantasy, or what's popular over there?
Yeah, I think for the most part, fantasy. Germany has their own game that's really popular. It's
Mhm.
like more popular than D&D. It's the Black Eye or the Dark Eye. The
Oh.
Dark Eye. It's a kind of like that's been around since also like the 80s, I think, and that's apparently more popular even than D&D in Germany. And that was like a bit of crossover with that into the Netherlands as well, mostly around like the border regions and stuff, I guess.
Mhm.
But I always get the sense that the European scene is very fractured, um, especially here in the Netherlands. Like the nearest game store for me is probably like 40 miles away.
Mm.
So like I don't have any gaming scene where I live. I'm in a fairly rural area. I'm like in a small
Ah.
town, technically a city, I think, but it's a
Mhm.
small town. So I get all my gaming online. Like
Mm.
I said, there's not much of a scene. Maybe like in the bigger cities like Amsterdam. I have a friend in Belgium. He lives in Antwerp, and apparently he's part of like a good like scene. But like I said, though, it's like little pockets, and then in between there's like nothing basically. So like I said, it always feels very fractured to me.
Uh, would you say that the overall gaming community is increasing with the access to playing online, or would you say like it's sort of just especially after COVID, people just went from in person to online?
No, I think it's definitely increasing, especially since most I'm guess the biggest gaming scene is probably still in America. That's why you're gonna find like your biggest pool of players, your biggest pool
Mhm.
of GMs and stuff. So all the other Dutch people that I've met gaming was just like in online games that were won by some American friend, and then just some other Dutch
Ooh.
person just happens to join. So So yeah, like I think it's increasing. Also because of Critical Role, I've met some young Dutch people that got into it because of Critical Role. They enjoy watching that, and they wanted to give fifth edition a try. But again, there's not much of a scene where they are, so they play online. So yeah.
Man, that must be horrible for all the Dutch players. You guys must be up in the middle of the night playing with
Oh
Americans.
yeah. But I'm up at all hours of the night anyway, so it's fine for me.
So, with Modern Necessities, you decided to go for the OSE.
Yeah.
So, what was it about like that rule set versus like a 5e rule set? What made that the perfect fit for your game?
Well, I'd already done a fifth edition one. I actually do have a 5e modern game.
Oh,
that was actually my first game that I officially released that had a successful Kickstarter. So this is actually my second Kickstarter that I'm about to do. But yeah, after that, I wanted to give the OSR a try because I made some friends in the OSR. I got interested in kind of like those old school rule sets. I actually made an early attempt at like an OSR modern game called Simple Modernity, and that was kind of more like generic OSR. It's like, yeah, here's like some rules that you can like use in any of your OSR games. But then, well, that was actually kind of popular. That hit like Copper Seller, I think, on Drive to RPG. People seem to like it, so I kind of wanted to give it a more professional, a more professional try instead of something that I literally just wrote in a week. So I ended up settling on Old School Essentials because I think as far as like all the clones, because it's a clone of BX of Basic Expert, it's probably the best one in my opinion. It's known for like its really good layout and stuff like that. Plus, I'll be honest, brand recognition. It's a lot easier to get interest in your game if you have that little OSE logo on your book,
yeah,
rather than just like, hey, here's my generic OSR stuff. Come check it out.
yeah.
So maybe a little bit of capitalism went into that too, but yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So Patty's Parlor asks, I totally get gaming in an incredibly small town. What about setting up a club at the pub or library?
Yeah, I've thought of doing that because I do have a local library and I do rent out, rooms. But at the same time, I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of an introvert. I'm a little bit antisocial. So taking that step is, I don't know, it's a little bit scary, a little bit daunting. So, but I have thought about it. So maybe someday, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems with the hobby in general.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
A lot of introverts.
Yeah.
So sorry. Getting back to your game. So currently you have the what do you call it? Sign up page for
Yeah.
for the Kickstarter. It's not quite out yet. Coming in March. So tell us a little bit about the all right, tell us about the campaign. Is it like what some people say, like a campaign guide where there's kind of sort of a storyline? Is it more of a setting book where it's like, boom, here's the world, and like here's this faction, that faction, make it up on their own, or is it just the rule sets?
It's for the most part, it's just a rule set. So I give you the tools to add modern flavor to your games. So I have like 20 modern themed classes in this updated version. I have extensive firearm rules from pistols to airstrikes. I have vehicle rules. I have like modern magic. Technomancy, I call it. I have like modern themes like magic items, like magic guns and stuff. I even have a chapter on like how would different races like handle firearm design. Like how would an orc design firearms versus a dwarf versus an elf versus a halfling. So I kind of go through all the standard races that are in OSE and kind of like give like a little blurb for like, hey, this is how they do guns. And then if you have a halfling gun, it gets this benefit, but this this drawback because halflings have a different design philosophy. So like stuff like that. And you're supposed to just kind of take that and use it how you want. So you could run like a purely modern game without any fantasy elements, but just using the gun rules and some of the classes. Or you could, do like an urban fantasy thing. You could take like an old module like Isle of Dread, and now it's like some Jurassic Park thing. You're like some mercenary team, landing on like this island with dinosaurs and like savage tribes, and you're dealing with that. So that was kind of like the thought process behind it. I am adding like a short like introductionary adventure, which is set in one of my own like campaign settings, and that will also tie into one of the stretch goals, which will be actually a whole like adventure module.
Oh,
That,
nice.
that yeah, it's called Bunker in the Badlands, which is going to be a homage to Keep on the Borderlands, basically, but like in a magical post-apocalyptic setting. And so yeah, there is a setting that you can get started with, but for the most part, like I said, you're kind of supposed to just make it your own. It's like, here's some guns, here's modern classes, here's like tanks and helicopters, and do it with them what you want.
So in addition to weapons, is there any other play features? Like I'm thinking of in a game like Shadowrun, you had a lot of weapons and armors, but you also had like hacking and sort of magical abilities. How did those work in your world?
Yeah, so like I said, I wrote new spells, technomancy spells. A lot of them you can kind of like take away the magical aspect and almost use them as hacking abilities. So you can kind of like reskin them how you want. So even in like in a setting where magic isn't really a thing, you could take the spells and just be like, yeah, this is some sort of like computer program that I'm running that like does this stuff. What was the other one? Cybernetics. What's that
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
asked?
things like
I
that.
have
Yeah.
that one of the stretch goals is actually going to be like cyberpunk rules. So the main book is like purely modern for the most part, and then one of the stretch goals is like rules for like adding science fiction and cybernetic or cyberpunk stuff, including cybernetics, new races, new classes, new weapons, all that stuff. But yeah, basically that.
Yeah. So, when you're writing urban fantasy as opposed to science fiction,
Mhm.
it dawned on me not too long ago that a lot of the stuff that they were writing about in the 70s and 80s, we kind of
Yeah,
have. It's kind of it's not really science fiction anymore. It's sort of like
yeah,
just modern, somewhat dystopian life. Do you
yeah.
think that there's like a distinction between urban fantasy and science fiction? I mean, other than maybe like spaceships or
Um, well, I personally believe that sci-fi is like a subsect of fantasy, but that's a
Mhm.
whole different that's a whole different discussion that goes into like a whole writing discussion. But yeah, I don't know. Like you could say that Shadowrun is like an urban fantasy setting, but it also leans heavy on the cyberpunk. Very heavily on the cyberpunk. It has cybernetics. It has like the megacorps and like all that stuff.
Mhm.
It's basically like what if you take like a William Gibson novel and add like dragons and magic. So yeah, I don't know. What
I
is the
don't know. I,
difference? Like yeah,
I I just call it San Francisco. That's
yeah.
um yeah. So when you when you're writing these kind of things, do you do test groups or is it just uh, sort of in your mind, or how do you go about writing your modules and your
um,
and the rule sets, I should say as well.
I'm very off the cuff with my writing. I just kind of start writing and it just kind of comes out. And then as I go, I just refine it. And sometimes I'll write something, I'll leave it be for like a week or two, and then I come back to it, and then kind of look at it with fresh eyes, and I'll tweak some things, or maybe even completely rewrite it because I have like a better idea now. But yeah, I never really go in with like a concrete plan. Like I said,
Mhm.
I'm very what's the word? There's a phrase for it, but it's not coming to me right now. Well, yeah, just kind of like off the cuff. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I just had it almost on the tip of my tongue, and it just went away again. But yeah,
it's all right. Um, and so planning on launching it in March.
Mhm.
How long do you think it would take to fulfill? Will it be done like
Um,
as soon as that Kickstarter's done, or is it going to take a little time? Or what can people expect?
it's probably going to take a little time because a lot of it, I'm kind of. It's going to depend on how well it funds. Like,
Hmm.
if I get the funding that I want and need, then I can get like all the basic art and all that stuff. But if somehow I end up with like $100,000, like, yeah, that's gonna change some plans probably. So it's hard to say. But I would probably think that once the Kickstarter is concluded, I would probably have the main book done probably within a couple of months. Already almost like done writing wise. It's probably like 80-85% writing wise. Everything else would just be like finishing it off and like doing the layout and adding the art and actually getting the art, which
Hmm.
that usually
But
takes the
yeah,
longest because artists they don't always work as fast as I
on
do.
time.
Yeah.
I've been
But
waiting
yeah.
for 3 years to get art from one guy.
Oh yeah, that's a
3
lot.
years.
Yeah, so the main book would probably be done hopefully within a couple months, but I tend to give myself like a year, just to be sure. I'm like, yeah, the deadline is like a year after the Kickstarter ended,
Hmm.
and
Okay,
and then
it's pretty
usually the
reasonable.
hope is like get it done way quicker. Because my first Kickstarter, I think I was like a day late, and that was mostly because I had to re-upload all the files to Drive to RPG, and Drive to RPG is very slow with all that stuff. Uh, but yeah, even then, like most of the time was just waiting on the art. So.
Ah, nice. So, speaking of art, and
Mhm,
it's something that I I can't, I think it was you that posted on Twitter
mhm,
that someone was, I don't know who it is, was funding a tabletop game. And they said, hey, just to let everyone know, I've got AI art. I use Chat GPT for the modules.
mhm.
So basically everything was done by AI. What are your thoughts on using AI as part of the creative process?
Um, I personally don't really care if people want to use AI. I mean, but I'm not really a busybody to begin with. Like, I'm very like live and let live. If somebody wants to use AI, have at it. Personally, I avoid it because I think at the end of the day, it limits your growth as a creator
Hmm.
because it's very controversial. Uh, People will actively avoid your work if you use AI, even to a slight degree. So I don't want to be known as the guy who uses AI for his books.
Yeah.
It's a good cost saving measure and like all that stuff. But I would rather spend some money now and just kind of like have a good reputation later than like cut corners and then just limit my growth in the end. And I'm not saying that to throw shades at people that do use AI. Like I
Mhm.
said, I don't care. You do you. But I just personally think, like I said, it limits your growth in the end. So.
I think so. I mean, I do think that there's a place for it, like especially in terms of like maybe if you were using it to do a little research or
Mhm.
to gain inspiration for something. But it seems like when you're, especially when you're on these crowdfunders, that when you're creating a product, people want, for lack of a better term, like a handcrafted product.
Yeah,
They want something that this person actually wrote. They want art that is, somebody actually sat down and decided to make,
yeah, exactly.
as opposed to the horrific images that we get out of AI art right
Yeah.
now.
And then the problem is, you do get like actual legit art, and then people accuse it of being AI anyway. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there is the whole ethical issue of, most of the art that they train the AI on, they just
Mhm.
stole from Wizards of the Coast, either
Yeah,
from the Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering, which, really sucks because if you paint in that style normally, well, now your work is definitely
yeah.
devalued.
Well, now Wizards of the Coast is also using AI. Basically, there's like been
Yeah.
multiple scandals already where like it turned out that something in one of the new books was AI. So Yeah. So I don't know. I just can't. Like I said, I just kind of want to avoid all the drama around that. I'm very adverse to drama anyway. So so yeah, I'd rather
Yeah,
spend some money,
yeah,
get some cool art, and yeah, maybe I'll make up for it later when people are actually buying my stuff.
yeah. I also there's also a bit of sort of implications that there's certain topics. If you ask like Chat GPT, they'll tell you
Hmm.
like, oh, I can't give you answers on that.
Yeah.
I was playing around with Bing's AI generator, and I
Hmm.
was like, uh, give me like a D&D adventuring party and some young hirelings. And I guess because I had the word young in there, they were like, nope, we can't make that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so you're not only the ethical and and perhaps the popularity problems that can come with it, but you also don't know what they're going to cut out because whoever's setting the putting the settings on these things, they don't want you to have
Hmm.
such and such kind of game, which I think is really unfortunate. You should be able to explore pretty much whatever area you want. That's like one of the joys of tabletop gaming.
Yeah. No, I agree. But then even beyond AI, people try to limit what you can do in tabletop gaming. So yeah, what kind of
Well,
stories you can tell?
uh, it's been a crazy 5-6 years, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Um, so for you, how often do you usually come out with various like modules or rule sets or whatnot? Is it like a 1 a year thing, or do you have several going at the same time?
It's usually so far. It's usually at least 2 or 3 a year. So even just last year, I finished my fifth edition modern game.
Hmm.
Then I wrote modern necessities, the first edition. Basically, this what I'm doing is like is like a massively updated version. Last year, I also did a supplement for Shadow Dog,
Hmm.
which then later on, like right before the year ended, I updated and basically re-released, so like way nicer. Yeah, and I've done like small adventures and like other stuff in between. So yeah, I keep fairly busy, I guess. But then I also go like long periods, sometimes months at a time, where I kind of like hibernate and I don't do anything, and then I suddenly get kind of to say it impolitely, get a bug up my ass, and then I write something in like 2 or 3 weeks and release that. So
Very cool. So then there's no set schedule. Do you
mm.
personally have any goals like, oh, I really want to put out like 3 projects this year, or is there sort of limit like, nah, I got to cut it back?
No, if I could, I would release like 20 a year. But like I know I have so many ideas. I have like a mental list, probably like as long as my arm, of like stuff that I want to do, that I want to write. It's just finding the time and the energy and the creativity, plus all the art and all that stuff. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
It's so and a lot of
Yeah.
projects I would want like really amazing art for. So those kind of are like on the back burner until maybe I've got a couple Kickstarters under my belt and maybe
Mhm.
got some stuff saved up. I can do like some really amazing project. Um, but yeah, no, I don't really have like a set process like that. I just write when the creativity hits me, and I'll release something. And it can be very random. It can literally be from one day to the next. Some idea hits me, and I start writing. And then, like I said, 2 or 3 weeks later, I have like some supplement for Shadow Dog out there, with layout and everything. So yeah, I don't know.
Nice.
I just kind of do whatever I want.
So for you personally, what games are you playing right now? Either DMing or as a player?
With my own group, I mostly play fifth edition because they're kind of normies. So
Mhm.
that's what we play. Which that's fine. I actually enjoy fifth edition. It has its rough spots, but I personally don't believe it's as bad as a lot of people say. I think fifth edition is fine. Um, Then I'm on the Basic Experts Gilded server. I've joined multiple games in that. We recently were playing the One Wing Second Edition, which is like
Oh,
Middle
nice.
Earth stuff, which
Mhm.
was really fun. I've played like Traveller, including classic Traveller, like the original 1970s one. I've
Oh,
played
wow.
BX. I've played First Edition. I've played all sorts of stuff. Uh, I kind of, as far as the stuff I'm running myself, I kind of told myself that at least this year I want to focus on the stuff I actually wrote.
Mhm.
So I want to run, modern necessity stuff. I'm working on a new project that's kind of like based on Zero E White Box. That's almost done. That I'm probably going to start playtesting soon. And I'm actually going to pair that with the Basic Experts Marco Hittel book. And I know you
Oh,
interviewed him as well.
nice.
So yeah, so it's going to be modern soldiers end up in weird Aztec land. So
That that sounds like it's like a Netflix series that needs to happen, you know?
yeah, no, I agree. I'm hoping that the campaign will be fun. But yeah, like I said, I kind of want to focus on my own stuff just to play test it, to see what I might need to improve or add. Because
Mhm.
I'm still learning. Like I only started this whole thing like I don't know, like 2 years ago, kind of randomly, because I just was kind of like going on a tangent now, but basically I was looking at 5th edition and it has like very like simple rules in the Dungeon Master's
Yeah.
Guide on how to like add like firearms and modern stuff. And it's like these kind of suck. I'm gonna write better ones. And that somehow turned into like a 200-page book. So and that's kind of basically
Yeah.
how I started in this whole thing. So, but like I said, I'm still learning. Like even stuff that I wrote last year, I'll look at now and I'm like, ooh, this is kind of like crap. I could do that way better now. So yeah. So like I think running my own stuff, to get back to the original topic, running my own stuff
Mhm.
will help with that. So
So as someone who's publishing,
mhm.
um, where do you think the industry's going in terms of like where the games are going to come from? So, for instance, Wizards of the Coast, they had quite a bad year last
Yeah.
year with the public relations. Uh, a lot of people say they're going to leave 5e. We'll
Hmm.
see. You have similar things with like Paizo and a lot of other companies.
Hmm.
Do you see uh, sites like Drive Through RPG sort of like becoming more popular, or do you think people are going to start looking more for smaller, more boutique games like on Kickstarter and other crowdfunding sites?
I think it's kind of going to be a mix because a lot of those Kickstarters are going to end up on Drive to RPG anyway.
That's
At
true.
least for fulfillment. I mean, I'm fulfilling mine on Drive to RPG, but yeah, I think definitely there's a sense that like all the big companies, they have had to take a little bit of a step back, and like third party publishers like me are kind of like becoming bigger. Plus, smaller publishers in general. I think yeah, I think we're almost like in a little bit of a renaissance again of like indie stuff. Almost like in the early, like the 90s, like early 2000s, when like all the D20 stuff was coming out. There was
Mhm.
there was like all these like third party people, and I think the same thing is happening now. That's why the whole OGL thing was such a big deal, because people were
Yeah.
like, You're taking this away from us."
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too because it's really the health of the community as a whole that props all
Yeah,
these big companies up, you know?
yeah, exactly.
But I was also wondering too, because let's just say there's been a certain vocal group of people who, they sort of want to scale down what's acceptable
Hmm.
for D&D 5e. But I believe it came out in 2014, so we're on year 10 now. That
Yeah,
means people who maybe started playing this as a 13-year-old, they're now 23.
yeah.
They're working or they're out of college. Um, it seems to me like a lot of these people are sort of would be in the market for something a little bit more mature
Hmm.
than the current crop of things that Wizards is putting out, and a lot of the more sanitized stuff.
Uh-huh.
It seems to me that third-party stuff should really be spreading in whatever flavor of rule set you want.
I think well, that's why the OSR is like so popular, I guess, because I personally know some people who are like big 5e heads for like a long time, and even they're like now like I'm kind of like done with 5e. I want to like explore like some older editions.
Mhm.
Maybe I want to play like second edition. I want to like check out BX or whatever. So yeah, I think there are people like that who just, well, that's probably why Shadow Dog, like something like Shadow Dog, like blew up, because it kind of promises that to bridge that gap between like fifth edition and like old school.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do think there are people that are kind of like looking towards like new horizons and kind of want to leave the sanitized 5e behind and check out some other stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And just from what you've been observing, are they looking into more genres,
Mhm.
or are they just saying like, well, I like 5e, so I want to try 1e, or I like, or I've already done that, maybe I'll try sci-fi or some other genre.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that are trying to like go into sci-fi or what's the other one? Well, mostly sci-fi really. Like those are like the two big
Mhm.
ones, fantasy and sci-fi. Like we said, for
Horror
some reason,
maybe.
urban, yeah, horror. There are a lot of like games like that. Like you know, people have criticisms about it, but that Candela Obscura game that the Critical Role people
Oh yeah.
released, that's kind of like more horror themed. That's kind of like a little bit Call of Cthulhu-ish. So
Hmm.
Call of Cthulhu, I think, is also like really big still. So yeah,
Yeah.
like I guess so. Fantasy, sci-fi, and horror are like the three big ones.
And so, for anyone who wants to see more old school gaming, go check out the Dungeon Delvers channel.
Hmm.
I've got it. I just posted a link there. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't checked out the Critical Role people's game yet. I guess I didn't realize it was out, but
Yeah,
it is something I wanted to see. I'm curious as to what they would do on their own.
I,
Um,
I know some
hmm?
people have reviewed it and they didn't have nice things to say, and then all the Critical Role fans got mad. So I don't know.
That's the unfortunate thing, is that it's so political on
Yeah,
both sides, that like you can't really have an honest discussion of, it's pretty good, but these few things need to be worked up.
yeah.
It, in some ways, to me, it's almost like 5e. It's like there's a lot of great stuff in 5e, but
Hmm.
yeah, not everything. Some things could definitely be better, like
Yeah. But
firearm
then
rules. And
but then it's hard to talk about it, like you said, without the culture war being dragged in. So
yeah. Ah, and unfortunately, it's an election year here.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it has been here as well. So yeah.
yeah, let's see. Thanks, Mercury. Uh, uh, Jorge. Yes.
Hmm.
It's funny. I was at the store today, and my wife pointed out there was a H.P. Lovecraft inspired cookbook.
Hmm.
So I took a look at it, and there was nothing, no octopus and no squids. How can you have an H.P. Lovecraft cookbook and not have
Yeah,
any tentacles in there at all?
yeah.
I
You'd
mean,
think
that
at
was
least have
just,
calamari or something.
yeah, that's total waste. But
Yeah.
let's see. Patty says, I think BLG actually did a really level-headed review. I've seen tons of reasonable people give reasonable reviews and then got a whole bunch of flack.
Yeah,
Well,
there was one guy who himself is very progressive, but
mhm.
he didn't like the game, and he basically uh, had to like clarify beforehand before he like did his stream or his video on it. Like, please don't attack me, people. Like, he basically was like begging the Critical Role fans not to like go after him. So I don't know.
I
Yeah,
don't know. I never really understand that mentality.
yeah,
I would just ask them to, in the video comments, like, oh, could you please explain that further? And because every comment you get or even dislike, YouTube counts it as fan interaction, so it
Yeah,
promotes the video more. Like,
Mhm.
you should be using that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, there were no fish heads either.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
weird.
it was like cakes. Like, what?
Okay,
How many
Lovecraft
cakes were
cakes.
there in Lovecraft?
Yeah, I can't really think of any. No, fish cakes. I don't know.
It's like some executive at the book publishing company said, "Oh, Lovecraft. That sounds like a nice name. Let's let's get somebody to write recipes for this,"
Yeah,
and didn't understand what it was.
yeah.
Let's see. So old Call of Cthulhu, so old school horror. It builds, creates complex mental suspensions, and a great DM will create twists and turns that catch each player by surprise, adding mental challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had never played Call of Cthulhu.
Me.
I always wanted to, but then last October on the Dungeon Delvers channel, he ran a Call of Cthulhu game that I got to play, and man, that game's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me thinking too. Do you think games with sort of alternative sorts of rule sets, do you think they'll get more popular? Call of Cthulhu's kind of only Call of Cthulhu, but I was thinking even of games like Dread,
Mm-hmm.
where you're using a Jenga tower to
I've seen that.
instead of rolling dice.
Mm-hmm.
It's the role playing game for people who aren't good at math, or
Yeah.
or what I say is like it's like your girlfriend's gateway drug into role playing games.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem quite as nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think games like that will maybe get more of a chance, since there's a little bit of a backlash against the big companies, or do you think it's still going to be mostly pen, paper, and dice using previously made rule sets?
Probably the latter, because most of the games that I see having like successful Kickstarters are like from existing rule sets, like Free League stuff. Like Free League uses like their same basic rule sets for like a lot of their stuff, and then they just tweak it depending on like the setting or like the vibe they're going for. But and then see what else. Powered by the Apocalypse, I know is like really popular, like those kinds of games. So yeah, like I said, for the most part, I see like games that have already established kind of like rule sets do well, or OSR adjacent stuff. So it's hard for like something like really new to make an impact unless the person that's designing it or writing it already has like a name, like
Yeah.
like what Colville is doing. I think it's Matt Colville
Yeah.
with his game that he just Kickstarter for like millions. Well, that's gonna be like his own like unique rule set, I guess. His fantasy heartbreaker. But he already has like a huge name. He's not me. Like nobody knows me. Like if I come out with like, hey, here's my game that I just wrote, guys. Like nobody's gonna care. That's why I have to put OSE on my book covers. So yeah, so like I said, I think it's mostly the established stuff that does well.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Do you think, sort of in a post-COVID world, that, like you said, it seems to be in Europe that the gamers are increasing, but it's all online. Do you think the lack of actually playing physically with other people, do you think that makes it easier or harder for new publishers to sort of break into the market?
I don't know, because I'm not familiar with like game stores and stuff, so I don't really know how they
That's true.
operate.
That's true.
I don't know like the logistics behind them. But for the longest time, those were like the main sources of people getting books.
Yeah.
But these days, you've got Drive to RPG, you've got Kickstarter, you've got all these Kickstarter projects that are coming out. So online seems at the very least just as big, just as important, if not more so now. So I don't know. Plus, you've got virtual tabletop programs. It's a lot easier to go on Roll20 and like find some people than it is, in most small European towns. So
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm guessing that online probably is gonna have a bigger impact eventually than real life. But isn't that
Yeah,
with anything these days? So
I think you're right. I mean, here now, I think game stores are kind of going to become more like movie theaters,
hmm
where when I'm old, so when I was a kid, like you pretty much had to go to the movie theater to see a movie. Now most people, like, it's an event, like you're going on a date, it's some sort of special, you go there and you get free crap or whatever.
hmm
um and I kind of think game stores here are starting to head in that direction,
yeah,
just because it's they need all these like Pokemon events and this and that, to be able to bring people in, And I think most people are looking for stuff on Amazon,
yeah,
or could be drive through RPG to play, where they don't necessarily have the oh, there we go. Sorry. Where they it's not as practical for the store to sell those items.
yeah. Well, from what people tell me who actually live in the US and like are own game stores, like a lot of them are closing
Yeah.
because they just don't unless they also sell like magic cards and like stuff like that. They don't really do well because I guess for the most part they're dependent on like an existing like customer base, the local nerds that like show up to maybe like look if there's like anything interesting that's new. But for the most part
Yeah.
they're just there to hang out with their friends or maybe like game at the table in the back room and stuff like that. And then new people, I mean, I guess you get the occasional person that's seen like Critical Role or like Stranger
Mhm.
Things or whatever and wants to get into D&D. But they can also just go to like some big bookstore. Like when I was in the US and I bought my very first D&D books, I just bought them at like Barnes and Nobles, I think. I never even went to a game store. So, and then those people can also just buy online. Like it's a lot easier to just fill your basket on Drive to RPG with some PDFs than drive to the nearest game store. Plus, a lot of them are kind of like on the normie spectrum, and they might not want
Yeah.
to like. They might be intimidated by a game store because they have like this image of like just a bunch of like sweaty nerds sitting around,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
as unflattering as it sounds. But maybe they don't want to deal with that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of a bad time here. Like you mentioned, a lot of them are going out of business, and I think part of it is they haven't kept up with the times. I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years, and the place we went, the carpet was sticky, and it looked
Mhm.
like it hadn't been cleaned since 1995,
Yeah,
and like they just weren't selling much anything other than snacks. We
yeah,
always tried to buy like a Coke or a candy bar or something just to give them a little bit of cash.
yeah,
But that's that's the unfortunate thing. But then we went to another one across town, and it was amazing. It was like a cafe. You
Mhm.
had to buy like a certain amount of drinks or food to play for X number of hours.
Mm,
I think we had to get food if we wanted a table, and then they had walls of games there where you
mhm.
just go with your friends and you pick a game off the shelf. And I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with my group at the time, and we actually said after, we'll never go back. Not because it was bad, because it was so loud from so many people, we couldn't hear each other. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds fun, actually. I wish I had something like that over here. Like I don't mind sweaty nerds. I'm one myself, so
Uh, all right. Uh, so if we let me see if I can get this working. Nope, that's not the right window. There we go. Let's see. Sorry, little computer issue here. Oh, come on. There we go. Whew. So, of your, this is your page
yeah.
on Drive Through RPG, and there are a ton of different modules on there.
hmm
Um, So obviously, Modern Necessities is going to be high on your list. But
Yeah.
outside of that, what would you say are your favorites?
Probably. Well, yeah, Modern Necessities. And then the Modern Adventurer's Guide to Guns and Gear. That's the fifth edition book I did. I mean that was the
Mhm.
first one, so you know that always will have a special place in my heart. I actually do want to update that one maybe later this year because, like I said earlier, I've learned a lot even just in the last 2 years. Plus, maybe I want to like improve the layout even more, add more art and stuff like that. So I'm gonna revisit that at some point. And then recently I did that Blacklight game there at the bottom for Shadow Dark, and I was actually looking at that earlier for like the first time in a month, and not to toot my own horn, I was like, this is pretty good actually. Like I have massive imposter syndrome, so
Mhm.
when I'm like actually writing something, I'm always like, oh, this is crap. But then when I like look back on it like later, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good. But yeah, Blacklight I really like because I think I did a really good job with the layout and stuff like that on that one. Yeah, so those are probably the top three. And then Waste Runners I also like. I wrote that for the Basic Experts Co-Puncher system. But it's kind of like a more post-apocalypse setting. But that was like one of my early games. I wrote that on a free layout program that's like really
Mhm.
notoriously awful. Scribus. It has like a bunch of typos and stuff like that. So while I do like that one, just because I think the setting is cool, like just content-wise, it could have probably been better. But that's why it's also 350 and not expensive.
So you were talking about you've been at this for about 2 years,
Mhm.
and making changes. What do you think your big changes are in the way that you write games now versus then?
Um, I think my layout game for the my layout game has improved a lot since I bought this program called Affinity,
Mhm.
Affinity Publisher. It's basically on par with Adobe InDesign, but instead of like the monthly fee, it's just like you pay for it
At
once and
once,
it's
yeah.
yours, and it's really good. And these days, I pretty much write the game directly in that program, and
Oh,
I'll
interesting.
be doing like at least the basic layout as I'm writing it. So I don't do like the whole like write it in Word and then like send it to somebody to like do layout. I just write it directly in Affinity, and yeah, that's been like the biggest change for me. Just that my books are like looking increasingly more professional. I'm just getting better at writing and like crafting rules and stuff like that in general. I'm getting more concise. So yeah, like, and I probably still have a lot of growing to do, but I think I'm gradually getting there.
Yeah, I definitely like Affinity. They just had at Christmas they had
Yeah.
a deal for all their programs for like
Mhm.
$75 US,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're looking to get into game design and you want a program that will like do the layout and everything for you, check out Affinity. Like I said, it's a one-time payment. They often have deals where you can get it for like $25. Normally I think
Yeah.
it's like 50, 60, but they often have deals where it's like 50% off. So yeah, just for anyone in the audience who might be interested, Affinity is really good.
Yeah, and they have a whole suite of programs too if anyone's
Yeah.
interested. So you can basically skip all of the Adobe programs and just use Affinity stuff.
Yeah, they have a photo one, they have like an art program.
Yeah. Uh oh, I just had another question that I blanked out on there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Um so yeah, Patty says, "Yeah, I'm still learning Affinity. They also have good deals on creator-made fonts and stuff." Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that actually.
And they also are directly linked into like one of those sites that has like all the stock images.
Oh, uh-huh.
So
Oh,
basically,
nice.
you can like just search directly in Affinity for like a stock image, and then like put it directly in your book.
Hmm. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah,
I bought it, but I haven't started learning it.
yeah. It it does
I've
it
gotta
doesn't
start
take a
laying a
little
book
bit to
out
learn.
soon.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I do think that is sort of an unappreciated area of writing modules is
hmm,
the actual design and layout.
yeah,
As much as some people like to give, 5e crap for some of the rule sets and stuff. I have to say the book layout is actually very good.
Yeah.
In the
I
sense
agree.
that I can figure out where everything is, and it's easy to tell like one thing from the other.
Yeah.
The actual writing in the categories may be a little different, but
Yeah.
but in terms of layout and design, it's quite nice.
Well, I feel like people, because of games like 5th edition and stuff, they kind
Mhm.
of take like layout for granted,
Yeah.
and it's not that easy. It's not even easy to figure out like where should something go. Like like I like having like a logical progression of like the rules and stuff. But
Mhm.
there's modern games even to this day, like the game I mentioned earlier, the One Wing 2nd edition, like that has like no logical progression, and the layout overall is really nice. But if you're making a character, you're like literally jumping from like page 20 to page 50, then back to page 30, then to page 65, and that's just to make a character. So like I said,
Yeah.
layout isn't always the easiest.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few things in 5e, like I thought the way they laid out spells in the handbook and the player's handbook was a little weird, and it
Hmm.
wasn't always the easiest. Like it should just be alphabetical or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, they
But
do it by the
the
levels, I guess.
class, I think, like by
Was it
class and
class?
by level, I think so.
Yeah, that makes
Or
sense. It's been a while since I looked at it, but yeah.
yeah, it was like what spells clerics and paladins
Yeah.
and stuff could use, and then by level, and it's like, well, how do I know? But
Yeah.
other than that, it was fairly good. Um, all right, so modern necessities. Are there any games that are coming out soon that you're excited for?
By other people? You mean?
Yeah.
Um oh, like now I'm drawing a blank somehow. Normally there's like games that I'm like, oh yeah, awesome, but like for some reason I'm drawing a blank now. I don't know, I haven't really looked at much lately, I guess, because I've just been so focused on my own stuff, and I haven't even
Hmm.
really been buying. Well, there's like X2 by Alexander McQueen that looks really interesting.
Oh,
I did back that on Kickstarter, so I'm looking forward to like the finished version of that. Um, uh, I did back Makuhito by the Basic Expert, so I'm
mhm.
waiting on. I already got like my print on demand version, but
Oh,
I'm
nice.
waiting. I'm waiting on like the offset print that
Yeah,
he's
me
doing
too.
for that.
It looks
Yeah,
great. I can't wait
yeah,
to get
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. He's like one
There's
of my best friends in the hobby, so I had to kind of like throw some money at him.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, um, yeah. Like as far as like the bigger publishers go, like I can't really think of anything because I don't know. Normally these days I prefer my own stuff over other people's stuff.
Yeah. Uh,
So
so, then are you like a forever DM, or do you actually get to play as a player as well?
uh, I get to play as a player. I'm playing in a game tomorrow. I'm like in a 5th edition game as a barbarian, so I get
Oh,
to do that
nice.
once like every couple weeks. But for the most part, I'm usually kind of like a forever DM, at least with my own group. So
Yeah, I think so. Well, I know it is quite late there. I don't want to keep you too much longer. So, for anyone who hasn't, go check out Modern Necessities uh, on Kickstarter now. There's a link pinned in the top of the chat. There's also a link in the description.
mhm.
Anything else we should know?
Yeah, no, just give it a follow, and you'll be notified on launch when I go live March 1st. And yeah, if you like old school essentials, if you like old school D&D, but you also like urban fantasy, and you like guns and soldiers and like orcs in tracksuits and gold chains, check out Modern Necessities.
Yeah. So Immortal Rising Comics said, "I want to play with Vic." Have you
Yeah.
considered adding like extra add-ons where they can play a session with you?
Uh, that could be interesting, but I'm very what's the word? Like I don't know, I'm very shy about that stuff. Like I
Ah.
would be so worried that I would do awfully, and then people like, oh well, if he's an awful GM, then probably his game's awful too.
Oh no,
I don't
but
know.
it's only for people who already back the game, so you already have their money.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, I don't know. I do want to run some stuff on the Basic Experts Guilded server. So if anyone wants to join on that, they're more than welcome to. But those are at
Very
least
cool.
people I know. But I don't know, strangers. I don't know. I'm scared.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming, and
Yeah, you're welcome.
thanks everyone for joining us tonight. On Friday, I will be on the Dungeon Delvers channel playing classic Gamma World. Come check that out. It's a lot of fun. Next week, Thursday, I have Peter Samedi, author of King Cryptid, and Rob Geronimo, who is the author and artist for Blood Realm. They're going to come on and talk about Alterna Comics. It's either the spring or the winter Kickstarter that they have. You can get all their books, and they're going to talk about the upcoming King Cryptid Blood Realm crossover.
Nice.
And for anyone who doesn't know, my own 5th edition campaign guide to Empire of the Undying Sun. Big announcements by the end of the month. I still have 6 days. Let it go. I will have the announcement ready by the end of the month. So everyone, thanks a lot. And Victor, hopefully we'll have you back again before too long.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.